knew there had to be something better. He felt it deep within him that his Hippocratic oath meant something to him. First, do no harm. And out of a love for his fellow mankind and knowing that there had to be a better way, he sought through his analytical processes, sought to find a better way.
Welcome to the Holistic Homeopathy podcast, Behind the Remedies. Join me as I sit down with homeopaths from around the world to hear their journeys, the moments that shape them, and the remedies and philosophy that inspire their practice. You'll hear honest conversations, real stories, and practical insights into the art and philosophy of homeopathy. I'm your host, Tania Aroha-Twentyman, homeopath and founder of Holistic Homeopathy. Whether you're new to homeopathy or on your own wellness journey, this is your space to learn, connect, and feel empowered. Let's go. Today's conversation begins far from the clinic walls on the wild, medicine-rich coastline of South Africa. I'm joined by homeopath Janis Wasserman, whose early years in the seaside town of Knysna along the lush garden route planted the seed for a lifelong devotion to healing. Living on the autism spectrum brings a unique clarity to her work, supporting an ability to recognize patterns and connections while holding space with deep compassion and objectivity. In her consultations, the experience of being truly heard becomes therapeutic, a process that reflects the heart of homeopathy itself. Today, Janice joins us to share her perspective on homeopathy and guide us through the life of Hahnemann through the eyes of a practicing homeopath. So welcome, Janice. It's really nice to have you here on the podcast today. I'm really excited about looking at the life of Hahnemann through the eyes of a homeopath. It'll be really interesting. But before we get into that, I'd like to hear about your personal journey to homeopathy. How did you find homeopathy?
It was kind of in two stages. My first introduction was when I just had given birth to my son. And we had a family friend who was a homeopath in the UK, came to visit us and took one look at my son and basically said to me, he's going to be slow to teeth, so you're going to want to get yourself some creosotum and some talc carb and you should be fine. Anyways, didn't think much of it. I got the two things that she mentioned, off she went, and then we immigrated from South Africa, hence the accent, to New Zealand. And he was, a normal, happy, bubbly child, a little bit niggly on the plane. I wasn't sure if it was teething or not. There were no visible signs of teething like the white gums or pink, or no drooling or anything, but just a bit of niggling. Could have been the air travel, could have been just, disruption of routine. I wasn't sure. But I happened to have the creosotum in my bag. And so to distract him, I gave him a little pillule of creosotum. He took it happily enough. And that was a 17-hour travel. And then once we landed in Auckland, it was about another hour or so to get to our accommodation. Then we went to lay down for 3 hours. At that stage, nothing, no visible signs of anything. He woke up 3 hours later and his bottom two teeth had erupted all the way through,
Wow.
Fully erupted.
Wow.
He woke up and all of a sudden he had this toothy grin. And I was like, what is this magic?
What just happened?
I was mind blown. So I've used it for both my kids and it's really been amazing for the molars. Amazing. That was the first. And then the second time, I didn't really think much of it, but then I ended up on medication and I had a really bad reaction to the medication, and it was what is termed iatrogenic harm. And I was walking around looking like a little old lady. I was buckled and bent. My back was contorted. I was hunched over the one side. I can't even fake the way it was. And it was really painful. The doctors, all they wanted to do was just put me on a cocktail of medications that I had to cycle through so that I wouldn't get addicted to them. And I had zero quality of life. I was living like a zombie, but like amped up on painkillers just so that I can get through the day. And it was homeopathy that managed to give me back my life. It literally saved my life and on more than one occasion as well. So yeah, we've had some, come to Jesus moments, if you want to call it that way, with homeopathy.
Some profound
Um,
moments.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And when I had another profound moment, I was at a sort of a crisis and I was like, what's my legacy? What am I going to do with my life? I don't just want to be, the shell of a human. And so I decided I wanted to study, and that's when how I ended up becoming a homeopath was,
Wow.
yeah, because I
Yeah,
was
it's
actually sharing with somebody else my testimony, and they were like, "You just light up when you're talking about it. You should become a homeopath." I'm like, you know what? Yeah, I'll go for that.
I'll do that. That
Yeah, I'll
life
do that.
changing. And when you study it is so life changing. You could never even begin to imagine the trajectory that life's going to take you on when you study.
Oh,
Yeah, it's
absolutely.
profound because you go through your own personal development as you're learning the philosophy, the remedies,
Mm.
and then you have classmates and some of them push your buttons or whatever else, and you have to dig deep and learn like what's going on inside of you. So it's a self-reflective process as well.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
it's really powerful.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the founder of homeopathy, Hahnemann. And for our listeners, can you tell us just a little bit about him before he started his journey? Who is this Hahnemann, this man?
So, okay, firstly, the listeners and viewers, you're just gonna have to forgive me. I'm a bit of a fangirl, so so I might go over the top. So, Hahnemann was, I think, an absolute genius, well, like centuries ahead of his time. He was born the third son in a family of six siblings, and himself, so that makes seven children. And his father was a porcelain painter in Germany in the late 1700s, so 1780, around about there. He had some interesting upbringing with his father, who was a porcelain painter, because he instilled that precision. Porcelain painting then, it was before the days of these mass-produced industrial templates that you could just stamp or just put a template down and paint over it. Porcelain painters needed to be precise, and every movement had to count. They had to be efficient with their energy. And it took a lot of concentration and a lot of, you can't just go off with the fairies while you're
Mm.
doing that. So it was clarity, focus, and precision. He was also born at a time when it was the, what do they call it? The Age of Enlightenment. So above all was science, reason, cognitive process and
Mm.
control, very scientific sort of approach to things. And so he grew up with that. And his father encouraged him in critical thinking. So that was a very crucial part of his upbringing that carried him throughout his whole life. And at some point, he became a doctor, and then he became, I'm fast forwarding through a little bit
Yeah,
here. We can
yeah.
always go into detail, but he got disillusioned, like so many of us have. We've tried going through, what Hahnemann called the allopathic route or orthodox medicine. It always tickles me pink when they say traditional modern medicine, because what's traditional about modern medicine? But anyways, I
Yeah,
digress.
yeah.
And his disillusionment, he knew there had to be something better. He felt it deep within him that, you know, his Hippocratic oath meant something to him. First,
Mm.
do no harm. And out of a love for his fellow mankind, and knowing that there had to be a better way, he sought through his analytical processes, sought to find a better way. And he refused. He had such strong morals that he refused to give in and continue to work as a doctor, despite the many pressures that he had. refused to just give up and work as a doctor until he could find a way that he could do no harm. And the integrity of that is,
By that time, Janice, did he have a family to support when he
oh
gave up
yeah,
medicine?
that was,
Ah, so it's a big decision, right? He'd been trained. His father had a humble profession, a
yeah,
beautiful artistic profession, and I'm sure that you'll enlighten us later on
yeah.
how that then was profound. And so there's a
Mm,
relationship between his father's profession and Hahnemann. So he had a family to support. He was practicing as a doctor, and it was like, I cannot continue to do harm, essentially, because
yeah.
first do no harm. So it was a big decision, right? And where did that lead him once he decided to give up medicine?
So, I mean, he had lost his income.
Mm,
And
mm,
so one thing about him is he was really proficient at language. So he actually, in order to, you know, make up the shortfall for the lack of income, he started translating medical texts.
mm.
By the time he passed away, he knew 11, he was fluent in 11 different languages. I mean, that's
That's
just
amazing.
amazing.
Yeah, very profound.
And so by translating the medical texts, he was able to support his family, who
Mm,
at the time that he gave up practicing, he already had 5 children plus a wife.
mm,
And he decided, I can't deal with this anymore. I can't continue to harm my patients.
mm.
And that's when he decided, no, he's going to step aside.
Oh.
And the woman he married is actually the stepdaughter of a pharmacist that he befriended. And him and the
Ah,
pharmacist would love to experiment with chemistry.
okay.
And that's very important because Hahnemann, the way he developed homeopathy is through experimentation. He would, when he experimented, these people knew they were consenting. They knew that they were part of what he called a proving, which I suppose modern language would say a trial, clinical trials. So he was the father of clinical trials.
Yeah,
He was the
yeah.
first, and he used himself as the first subject to test.
Mm,
And that was when he was 35 years old
mm.
when he first started piecing together something that could be, that was basically the shoots, the first seeds that were sown for homeopathy or what would become homeopathy.
And that let's go back to that, to where the process started. So he's translating these medical texts so he can earn income for his family. And what does he discover? He comes
Ah,
across something really
the
important.
famous Cinchona experiment.
So tell me
Yeah.
about that.
So one of the works that he was busy translating was Cullen's Materia Medica. And in that, Cullen was explaining that cinchona bark, or which is the source of where we get quinine or quinine, however you pronounce it. Cullen attributed the effectiveness of quinine or cinchona bark to the astringent factors or the astringent properties being so bitter. And Hahnemann was like, I don't know so much about that because if that were the case, we could take anything bitter, but nothing else that's bitter actually works for malaria.
Yeah.
And what he started doing, and this is where I talk about the clinical trials as well, is he started experimenting
Mm,
on himself. And so he started taking small quantities of cinchona bark himself and started ingesting that. And he would diligently record all of his any new symptoms that came up. And this would go on to form the body of what he calls the materia medica, or the proving of a substance. And this is the first framework that we see of how he developed homeopathy.
mm.
But at this stage, he didn't know he was going to go on to do that. It was an experiment. And even in the early days, this is that precision and that dedication and that focus, that singular focus that his father had already instilled in him was already apparent right at the very beginning with him approaching this experiment this way. And it had to be repeatable. And so he had somebody else test it. Once he had found out, okay, this is how it is, and then eventually he'd get a group of family members or people who were healthy, which is very important, who would also take on this proving, and that they would start also ingesting small amounts. Sometimes he would let them know what the substance was, and sometimes it would be a blind proving where he knew what the substance was. They would know that they're taking something as part of a proving, but it would be like a without any cloudy, judgment or perception or preconceived notions of what it should be.
So he started taking this cinchona and
Mm.
recording all the symptoms very methodically, because this is the sort of attention to detail that his father had imbued in him in a way. And what did he discover when he started taking cinchona bark, which was a treatment for malaria at that time? What did he discover in his symptoms?
Well, his symptoms that he started experiencing were those as seen in malaria patients. So the fevers, the sweats, the delirium, the worse for the loss of fluids, and the periodicity. And by that I mean symptoms would happen and they would repeat at regular, predictable intervals. These all form part of the picture. And from that, he deduced his next theory of I've got to get it right. Similia similibus curenta, which is like cures like.
So he was taking this substance, this cinchona bark. He had the symptoms of malaria, and it sparked this, what a clever mind from that to say, hold on a minute, if this thing can bring up these symptoms, maybe that can cure these symptoms. Like that's an amazing leap in a person's mind to go, and also to endure the uncomfortableness of all of that, and then to bestow it on your friends and family. Hey, come along for the ride. You want to do it proving? Yeah, okay. What are we proving? Oh, mercurius. Oh, well, I think there was enough of that going around at the time with mercury poisoning. So this just shows this amazing genius mind, and this ability to think outside the square, to question the detail,
and to make connections.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
the concept of using certain plants and herbs to treat conditions that have similar properties to what is induced by that, it was not a brand spanking new concept. Hippocrates, and even the first documented evidence of that is in Egyptian times, in ancient Egypt. Hippocrates mentioned it briefly, not in so many elegant words as what Hahnemann did. Also Paracelsus, but it was Hahnemann who was the first person to weave it together in an elegant fashion as a founding concept, as a tenet of a medical modality.
Like treats, like. And so talk me forward where he went after this discovery. And obviously he started testing, doing provings, which clinical trials on more and more people with more and more substances. But how did the whole potentization come into it, using minuscule, minute doses to help a healing response, to facilitate a healing response? How did he go from using these crude substances to...
It was a process. And I think that his wife's stepfather played a crucial role in sort of fanning the flames of the way his mind worked with that experimentation. And he started with lower doses of what was being used. And he found that it was still too crude. And then he would get them lower and lower till the point that he actually started diluting them. And he kept diluting them. And he found that it helped to dilute it. It reduced the pathological or the negative side effects, but it still had some side effects. But at least it had retained more of the healing properties. I don't know if it's actual fact or if it's just one of these like little
cute stories.
Hartmanian urban legends. But apparently, the story goes, he had a patient call him in the middle of the night, send a messenger saying he's needed urgently. So gets his little, by then he's got his own little kit together of stuff that he's made himself and trialed and tested on himself. And he's got his kit in his saddlebags, and he gets on his horse and off he goes, galloping in the night to try and get to his patient before his patient, ends up taking a turn for the absolute worst. And so he gets there in time, and he takes out the remedy that he perceives as the closest matching to the set of symptoms, and he gives the client this a dose, and remarkable recovery. Like, this is unlike any recovery he's seen, even giving that same substance to his other patients. He witnesses something remarkable. There's something has changed. And the only thing that has changed between that and the current, like between his previous clients who got the same remedy from the same vial, the only thing that changed was he galloped on a horse. And so what he could attribute was his remedies were in the leather saddlebags, pounding against the horse's flanks every time as he galloped along. And so he thought, oh, I wonder if that's got something to do with this. And again, with his analytical, experimental brain, but insistent that it has to be repeatable, it has to be well documented, because if he hits on a good thing, he needs to know what it is. But if he hits on a miss, then he needs to know to eliminate that process so that he doesn't keep wasting his time on it. So his great analytical mind records everything. And he had a leather-bound Bible, because he was a God-fearing man, read his Bible. And so he had a thick leather-bound Bible, and to try and emulate or mimic the action of the vials slapping against the horse's flanks, he would strike the remedy against the Bible, the leather-bound Bible, and trying to mimic that action of, unbeknownst to him at the time. And for the next 200 years, science would struggle to try and explain the process. Nowadays, there's been some research that has come out that says, well, basically, it's nanomedicine. He created by hand the first nanomedicine 200 years before science caught up. I mean, fangirl moment deluxe. Okay, so
totally.
I'm just so in awe of the way his mind works.
Yes.
And how he connected that was the only difference. And he tested it, and it worked. And then he tested it on the next one, the next different remedy that he prepared, and it worked. And now we're getting into, how can you make a medicine when you can't see what the parts are? And now we start getting into the trouble of, like, he's now really making waves with the apothecaries, which is the pharmacists of the time. And they had, with all the revolutions that were going on at the time as well, you had the French Revolution, you had the Napoleonic Wars going on in the background, these wars coming to a close. You had a time of sort of restructuring. And that had an impact as well, because with that restructuring, there were new laws, new legislations, new protections to prevent overstep and overuse, and so along with those laws was one in particular was laws governing the apothecaries and their right to distribute and control medicines. And so by him producing his own medicines, he was now in direct conflict, and not only that, he was in direct violation of this new law. But he couldn't get any apothecaries to actually produce the medicines because it wasn't profitable for them. Because it was of so minute substance that they didn't want to do it. So they kind of forced him to break the law and then took him to court.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so even in his own village, he was an outcast out of the medical system. And yes, he was actually convicted of,
Oh, really?
yeah, he was a rebel. I
Mm.
mean, it's just his mind was just on another level. And so, yeah, his little rebellious streak was already there. It was already evident that,
Yeah.
he didn't just accept things. He challenged. And then at the time where he started putting together the basics of homeopathy, and when he published his first paper, which was scathing of the orthodox medical practice, it was the like really early days of it was the end of the Age of Enlightenment and the start of Romanticism, which was so the Age of Enlightenment was embracing everything cold, clinical facts, reasoning, it's the mind. It's
Very
all about the mind.
cerebral. Yeah. Yeah.
And Romanticism was that flipped on its head. That was rejected. It was, you know, fought against, and it was like, what's the word? It was challenged. And in its place was more talk about vitalism and vitality and, energy and all these beautiful sort of less scientific, less, you can't put your finger on it kind of,
Mm.
it's more the ethereal, conceptual stuff. And it was in that time that Hahnemann, I think about 5 years before the actual dawn of Romanticism, that he started challenging, the status quo. And so it was just at the right time that, okay, he started challenging them, and then actually the sort of the rest of Europe started challenging, the status quo and
Mm.
what was accepted, and bucking against the whole mind dominant
Mm.
sort of
Mm.
field.
Yeah.
And so,
But you know what's beautiful about that,
yeah,
Janice, is that you can see the progression of homeopathy where Hahnemann writes eventually the Organon, which is our book of the fundamental principles, really is born out of that time that you say where everything was very mind dominated, because here you have the structure, right? And here's the structural bit, and then you have the romanticism almost on top of that, which is the fluidity around homeopathy, how you come to a remedy, or we all practice in different ways
yeah,
and yet stay true to this fundamental principles. So it is an art and a science, and I think the science is that fundamental, the principles, and then the
foundation.
art is the maybe it's the masculine and the feminine, I don't know, but he somehow brought those two things together, and I didn't realize till our conversation now that he lived through those times and
Yeah,
homeopathy was being developed. So you can see this beautiful yin yang.
yeah,
That's how I'm understanding it as you're talking.
yeah, very much. I mean, you've got
Mm.
these two seemingly contradictory fields of thought or approaches to life, and yet somehow he managed to blend them together in harmony to create a medical modality that has saved easily thousands of lives.
Mm.
You
Millions,
know,
yeah.
it's just absolutely astounding that somebody can live through that time, through all that upheaval, and bring out something so beautiful.
So, on that, how do you think it was for him personally? I mean, it's hard to know, isn't it? But this being an outcast, doing something so rebellious and so pioneering and different, which I just love, is like, how do you think that was for him?
Well, it must have been challenging. I
Mm.
mean, there's evidence of him being relocated all over the place. Now, part of that is because it was wartime. Like he was a lecturer at the University of Leipzig, and the next year it was the epicenter of the largest battle that side of World War One. You know,
Wow.
the largest battle of Europe, that side of World War One. It was
Mhm.
also called the Battle of Nations, was at Leipzig, where he had been lecturing. So we know that he was sort of shunted around here and there. Part of it is, yes, the war. Part of it we know was influenced by him just not being accepted. Like he was run out of town several times
Mm,
because he would start practicing, the apothecaries would get their nose out of gear or, bent out of shape, and then he'd have to move again.
mm,
But it wasn't just him. It was him, his wife, and by this stage, like they already had like, I think eventually like 10 kids.
wow.
It's, I say I think because it's a little, because depends on the source that you
Mm,
use. Some
sure.
say 11, some say 9,
Yeah.
and the years and the dates as well, depending on the sources. But he had a large family that he was still, by this stage, he was now starting to study medicine, practice medicine again, but not as the old style. He was practicing as the homeopath
Mm,
while he was still developing homeopathy. So he hadn't fully developed the whole system.
mm,
He hadn't developed the Q potencies or LM or the 50 centesimal potencies, depending on how you look at it or which number you use. He hadn't developed the miasms yet. That all came later. But he had started with his, writing out his single papers and his organon. And yet his wife and his family supported him through that while he supported them financially as best he could, still translating.
mm,
What I find really interesting though, just a little side note, he was so proficient in so many languages, and he was translating documents from multiple languages into German and from German into other languages and from, say, Greek into whatever other language, not necessarily German. And his grasp of languages and language structures helped him form the language structure for homeopathy because it didn't exist. He had to not only create a whole system of medicine, he had to create a whole language system
mm.
to go with that system of medicine. And yet he never translated his own works. So what we're getting in English is the best translation by somebody else
Mm,
understanding his work as they see it. And yet
mhm.
it still translates. It
And I
still runs true, which is
exactly, exactly. Or like it survived the test of time
yeah,
because the fundamental principles are were seeded in truth, you could say, and the garden has grown in truth, and the mighty trees are towering in that truth. So, and the beautiful thing that I think too is that remedies we learn more about them with time. We can do reprove them. We can do all these things. But pulsatilla now is still pulsatilla when Hahnemann, our language is the same. And the other thing that I think is really beautiful is if we talk to homeopaths from the other side of the world, we're all using the same words for the same remedy. It's not a different word in German or a different word in French. It's the same words. And I think it's like this beautiful common language,
mm,
the fundamental principles of the organon of Hahnemann's indications, we're all speaking, it's the same language, it's the same
mm.
principle. So it's a universal humanitarian medicine, I believe.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm,
absolutely.
yeah. And so, how did Hahnemann end up then with his young wife, Melanie? So here he is, he's married,
Yeah,
he's got all these children, 9, 11, what's another few more?
yeah.
Those poor children that got forgotten about at the end.
Oh, yeah,
The youngest child syndrome.
yeah.
What happened in this time? So he's developing homeopathy, he's being kicked out of numerous towns, he's upsetting the pharmacies of the time.
Yeah. So when he got convicted of that breach of that law, He was then offered safe haven by the Duke Frederick, I think it was, and I'm not going to, I think it's like Cotton. I don't know how you pronounce it, but it's, yeah. Well, let's just go with Cotton.
Yeah.
But Cotton. And so he went there, moved his whole family there, and he was there allowed, he was actually given permission to create his own remedies. So that was really important because that became foundational in him creating the LM potencies and being able to experiment further with the potencies and stuff and with more source materials to create more remedies and to then do more provings. And this Duke gave him safe haven, allowed him to practice, gave him permission to create his own remedies. And word spread because obviously with the Napoleonic Wars and the end of the 7-Year War and the French Revolution and everything happening all at the same time, it was like Europe was just this bubbling pot of chaos. And you've got the armies, the troops, the military coming back through from India and from Russia and coming through the area, bringing with them cholera and dysentery. And in these epidemics, you found that Orthodox medicine relied on bloodletting, mercury, arsenic, or leeching, which is kind of another way of bloodletting, or tepanning as well, where they drill a hole through your skull and let you. Yeah, that was still being practiced in his time. And
Wow.
so that was the only answers that they had, you know. And here comes Hahnemann, and he goes, well, you've got these symptoms. I'll give you this remedy. And he started having great success, and word spread like wildfire. And people were coming from all over Europe, coming to this little cotton and seeking his treatment. And so for 11 years, he was able to be stable in that environment. So he had already printed or published the Organon by then. That was like 30 years since he had published the Organon. He was now there getting this fame and fortune. And one day he gets, oh no. So then when he's 75 years old, his wife, Johanna, passes away.
Okay.
And at that stage, his youngest two daughters had devoted their life to helping their father with his practice. And 5 years later, so the youngest two were 24 and 26 at that stage. So they were still quite young, and he's 75. So anyways, one day 5 years later, he gets a knock on the door. A young Frenchman has arrived seeking treatment. And okay, as you do, you say, okay, well, you've come a long way. We'll show you hospitality and put you up for the night. And the next morning, no young Frenchman came down. It was a young French woman who came down, which was scandalous because those are the days when a young woman could not, especially an unwed woman, you couldn't. It was a scandal to go unaccompanied anywhere. You had to have a chaperone. And she had traveled, this is Milani, had traveled from Paris, France, right through to Cotton, Germany, on her own, disguised as a young French male, so that she could go without a chaperone. And she wasn't there for treatment. That was just her ruse or the excuse to go there.
Okay.
But once she had revealed herself to be a woman, it came out that she had gone all this way because she wanted to study under Hahnemann. She had heard about this great mind with these great results and his revolutionary way of thinking and his, this modality of medicine that he had created himself. So she was 45 years younger than him. She was only 34 years old.
I think that's more scandalous than dressing up as a man. Obviously, his
And
homeopathic remedies were working really
oh
well.
yeah, there must have been.
He had lots of vitality.
Oh
11
yes.
children and then a young.
Oh, yes.
Mm.
And so bear in mind, here's this now 80-year-old
Yes.
man,
Yeah.
still in his prime,
Yeah.
with his, well, his brain is in its prime. And he's got these two daughters working with him in his
Mm.
practice. And this young Frenchman comes down. Can you imagine what the daughters must have thought? And she came down saying that she wanted to learn from him. And they started working together. And 3 months later, they were wed.
Wow.
3 months. Talk about a whirlwind romance. And his daughters were not happy
Mhm.
because they had dedicated their life to running his practice with him. And I suppose one could assume that they expected to inherit the practice and to continue once he was gone, but thinking that it would be death that took him, not some 34-year-old young floozy from Paris, France.
Ah.
And yes, so within 3 months they'd married, and then Milani convinced him that Paris was aching and yearning for a mind like his, and that they would welcome him. He would not be ostracized. He would not be ridiculed by the medical fraternity and raced out of town or anything like that. He would be welcomed. And so he packs up his things and off he goes with Milani to Paris, France. He sets up a practice there. She accompanies him and she works with him alongside him. And for 8 years, they have a very successful practice until he passed away. Yeah. And at the time that he passed away, he was still working, still developing,
Wow.
still distilling
Yeah.
homeopathy down
Yeah.
to its core essence. And he had actually written the sixth edition of his Organon of medical arts, or the Organon of medical art, yeah,
Yeah.
that we have today.
Yeah.
But that wasn't even published. He asked Milani to publish it, in once he had passed away, and she just couldn't bring herself to do it because she thought, because this is where he talks about the Q potencies, and he was like, she thought, I can't do it. They'll laugh at him and it'll be the end of
Ah.
homeopathy. I dare not do it. And it was only much later, I think after she had passed away, I think it was something like 100 years later or 120 years later before it was actually published.
Okay.
So during that time, you had people like Constantine Herring, Borica,
Keen.
obviously Kent,
Mm.
the Kentian homeopathy,
Yeah.
that was like religious to the law, to the
Mm.
letter,
Mm.
following his fifth organon, when meanwhile this other level up was
Mm.
there that just wouldn't be published. She had refused, and his son had refused until eventually it came out. I think his grandson or his great grandson had finally allowed it to be published. But
That's such a
wow.
beautiful story about Hahnemann, and it's nice to hear it told in like this wandering, beautiful
Yeah.
way, how you've seen it through your eyes. If Hahnemann walked into your clinic today, do you think
Yeah.
there'd be anything that he would recognize about homeopathy, how he
Yeah.
founded it?
Well, definitely had recognized the organon, which is sitting right next to me. But I'd like to think that I'm following the tenets, the
Mm.
foundational, the one that means the most to me out of the whole organon is his aphorism 3, where he says you first have to identify what it is that needs to be cured. Then you need to know what is curable in
Mm.
your medicines. And then need to know how to adjust what is curable in order to cure what has been identified that needs to be cured. So I use that with my clients every day. And often people will come to me and say, like, I deal with some kids on spectrum, and they're like, I don't want to take it because it's going to, I'm going to stop being me. I'm like, no, It's not going to stop you being you. You're not going to lose any creativity. You're not going to lose any talents or gifts. It could, because homeopathy doesn't work that way. It only, we work on what needs to be cured. And that, by essence, is what deviates from your healthy natural state.
So where's the imbalance? Where's the body giving us the symptom picture of help me here? And that could be mental and emotional.
Yeah.
Hey, but it's not the personality. I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
But it could be like, this thing here is out of balance. And I often say to people, it's like our superpowers, often the volume's turned up too loud. And it's just like, oh, and we turn the volume, the remedies help bring this balance back, and then we can be more centered. So where do you feel most aligned with Hahnemann?
I'd say with that, making sure like to only treat what is treatable and to look at the case objectively. Often we as homeopaths, we never know what's going to be in front of us. And it might be something that is personally challenging, confronting, and learning to recognize that and put that aside and just deal with the facts and look at the patterns and look at pathology. He was very precise, very measured. And I'd like to think that I've got some of that. But yes, that analyzing mind that likes to know more. And the I call it my 5 whys. When I'm looking at a case, I'll ask why. And then I'll go, okay, so this person developed a cough, but why? That's always my first question. Why? Yeah. What happened before that? Because there's a lot of fluff that develops. We pack a lot of stories onto things. We're treating the cause, but we're looking at the symptom to give us clues as to what the cause is.
The gateway, like the symptoms, the gateway to.
Yeah. And it's the collection. It's that unique, each person has their own unique little pattern of disease. And they've got their own unique sort of trigger points of, like some people can handle emotion and they're fine. Other people, they have the smallest little emotional upset. And then 2 days later, they are sick as a dog. And it's not because they caught a virus. It's because the root of it was that emotional upset was just too dramatic for the vital force. So
if you could ask Hahnemann one question, what would it be?
This might be a bit controversial.
Go on, you can do it.
I would really love to know his opinion on what passes for homeopathy these days, because not all of it is actually homeopathy. How much of it would he be proud of? And how much of it would he, be happy to say, yes, that's my system of medicine.
What do you think? What do you think he would say?
I think some of it he'd be proud of.
Yeah.
Some of it he'd say, your heart's in the right place, but you've deviated from the path. And like with his, I don't want to get like, this is just my opinion. It's controversial, I know. Some people say, oh, but Hahnemann, if he had lived all this time, he would have developed his system of medicine, because he was still performing experiments, even right up until he passed away. But all of his experiments, everything, it held true to the roots, to the foundations. And it was always testable. And Hahnemann's stuff, it was repeatable. And a lot of what passes for homeopathy, it's based on somebody and an ego trying to develop a brand new system or trying to take it off into a whole new. And I think ego plays a big role in some of the homeopathy branches that exist these days. And some of them are just, maybe they mean the most, maybe they mean well, but they just kind of lost focus on the foundational tenets. It's individualized, the smallest dose, and it's similimum. Sticking to that, if it deviates from those foundations, I don't think he would call it homeopathy. And about similimum, Hahnemann said to use one substance. And yes, some people say that he experimented. There is a letter where he said he has tried it.
Okay.
But he has found that the gain was not consistent, so not repeatable, and he would not continue doing so.
Oh, that's interesting. But this is what I mean by the fundamental principles to what I call classical homeopathy,
Yeah.
because it's homeopathy that Hahnemann taught us. And those fundamental principles of like treats like, individualization, and the law of the minimum dose, which I think we could have another whole conversation about, because what is a minimum dose? A minimum dose for me, according to my vitality, could be different than a minimum dose for you, which then comes back to individuality. We're assessing the person in front of us. And I think it also provides an opportunity to really be heard, to be deeply listened to be understood, and that you are a unique human being. We share our humanity, we share our humanness, but we are actually all unique, and therefore may need millions of different remedies. Absolutely. So it's absolutely fascinating, and I can see why he spent to his dying day with his beloved homeopathy, because it just keeps giving and giving and giving.
50 years, and he was still not finished developing it. 50 years of actively working on homeopathy. It blows my mind.
So if there's one thing that you'd like to change about a belief that's held about homeopathy, one belief you'd like to change, what would that be?
There's so many.
No, you only get to pick one.
What is homeopathy and what it's not? A lot of clients, or even just people who think they know what homeopathy is, and then they find out, no, but what they were introduced to homeopathy as was a naturopath who had done one module of homeopathy and thinks they know homeopathy. And, when people think of homeopathy, a lot of them think, oh, it's a weekend course or a hobby, or it's somebody maybe did a course for a couple of months and now they're teaching, now they're a practicing homeopath. A lot of them don't realize that you actually study for 4 years, or 3 years in some cases now. And it's a lot more nuanced. There's a lot to go into it, and it's not simple. It's as much the homeopath's perception as it is what the client brings to the table.
So what is it not? What is homeopathy not?
It's not herbs. It's not tinctures. It's not just throwing a pill for every ill. It's supposed to be empowering to the human body.
It's not multiple remedies in one bottle.
Yeah, and it's not just because you can take a remedy for something doesn't mean you should. Let your body tell you if it's stuck. Homeopathy is not supposed to be forced. It's not supposed to be pushed, and you cannot fast track homeopathy. There is no shortcut. There's a lot of things I find in homeopathy where it's like taken out of context and they only take a part of it and forget the rest. And the rest is what actually gives context. Like it's dilution and succussion, or it's safe and effective when used correctly and appropriately and administered by a qualified homeopath. Yes, there are a lot of things that you can do at home. But yeah, always do it in conjunction with a qualified homeopath. You can experiment, but just be aware that don't go too crazy. Because what has the power to heal has the power to cause ill as well if you abuse it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Janice. It's been a really beautiful journey down this lane of getting to know Hahnemann through the eyes of a homeopath. So for our listeners, where can they find you?
My business name is Essence Homeopathy NZ. My website is essencehomeopathnz.com.
And you've got a Patreon site. I just got on there and had a look before we chatted. So there's some really interesting stuff on there. So how do people find you on Patreon?
So my Patreon is Journey with Janice to the Essence of Homeopathy.
Lovely. Okay. Thank you so much. And I'll put a link to all that in the show notes so people
Thank
can
you.
find you. Thank you. That was really interesting.
Thank you.
Okay.
It was fun.
Yeah, good.
Glad to go down a rabbit hole with someone else. I love it.
With a fellow homeopath.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Awesome.
Hey, that was fun. Thank you for joining me today as I interview homeopaths from around the world. Just a quick note before we finish that this content is for education only and isn't a substitute for professional medical advice. Always consult your healthcare provider. If you'd like to learn more or explore working together, you can visit me at holistichomeopathy.co.nz. And if this episode resonated with you, feel free to share it or follow the podcast so you don't miss future episodes. Take care, and I hope you'll join me next time.